Colonel Henry Woodward Sackett put that up. He lived right on that corner and was proud he had an ancestor who'd fought in the Revolution. But so did the man who soon would buy the farm down the hill, Colonel Edward Lyman Bill. Colonel Bill, in fact, also bought the New Rochelle farm once owned by the voice of the Revolution, Thomas Paine. Meanwhile, Colonel Sackett campaigned to memorialize a Mamaroneck rock said to miraculously depict the face of George Washington. Never mind whispers, it was carved by a construction crew. Local lore had it that the two patriotic colonels had served together with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. But Sackett's only involvement was as a New York paymaster who delivered cash to the famous horse soldiers down south. As for Colonel Bill, he claimed to have fought in the Indian Wars in the Dakota Territories. Yet both men would set the stage for creation of Bonnie Briar Country Club. Colonel Sackett made his name as a leading newspaper lawyer in New York. One reward was a home on elite Quaker Ridge, named for its proximity to an historic Quaker meeting house. Set amid farms and untamed land were a dozen estates perched right above the current Bonnie Briar driving range, one owned by the president of the New York Stock Exchange. There, in 1901, Colonel Sackett rented the pasture land below so he and his neighbors could enjoy the sport gaining cachet among Eastern society. Across Westchester, a group dubbed the Apple Tree Gang had launched the St. Andrews Club in 1888. Scarsdale Golf Club followed, and years later, a local architect recalled how golf came as well to Colonel Sackett's privileged enclave.
Although they otherwise identified themselves with New York, they all considered the Ridge their home. Every family had plenty of carriages, and each afternoon the ladies would dress up with gloves and parasols to meet their husbands at Mamaroneck Station and also chat with the ladies of Orienta. The people gave pleasant little teas and lawn parties and dinners and birthday parties full of children and mothers and nursemaids. One of the interesting features of the community was the Little Golf Club, among the oldest in the U.S. There was a tiny golf house with a porch on the edge of Colonel Sackett's property where the wives of 8 or 10 members would take turns serving tea on Sunday afternoon. As a child, I remember these occasions, but about that time people took up motoring and interest in the Little Golf Club waned.
Colonel Sackett's playground faced another challenge when the farmland it used was bought by a magazine publisher, accumulating hundreds of acres in the area. Edward Lyman Bill was from a blue blood Connecticut clan.
And we're in Lyme, Connecticut, where the colonel was born. This is where the story of the Bills began, and then they spent a lot of time in the city and spent a lot of time in New Rochelle and worked with your club, and then always returned to Lyme. The Bill family goes back to printers commissioned by the king in the 1500s and came over in the Great Migration and traces lineage back to both those ships and the Mayflower. Colonel Bill was born in a small cape about 5 miles south of here and disappeared for a while and went out west and then came back to court a wife. Both Caroline and Colonel Bill went to the city where he joined with other families in the family tradition of printing and formed Bill Publications.
Bill's flagship magazine focused first on the piano industry, then embraced a promising new technology. He also wrote a book of business advice that included the chapter glorifying the countryside.
Is it not a fact that genius is essentially rural, a country product? In this bustling, hustling, modern world of ours, we are apt to overlook the charm of silence. The trees, the flowers, the rocks tell the story of the ages and are eloquent in their silence.
So it was that Colonel Bill began buying up land in Westchester, including the pasture used by Colonel Sackett and his golfing buddies. That generated other colorful Bonnie Briar lore.
I started here as a caddy in the late 60s, early 70s, and carried one bag, the old Burton bags, moved into the kitchen. One of the things we found in an old dumpster years ago was a menu. And on the menu, on the back of it, was a story. The story of two colonels who were fighting over the land.
There was a small golf course here, about 6-hole golf course, apparently. And Colonel Sackett's had the clubhouse, and his porch went out onto Colonel Bill's property.
And one day, when a ball came out of Sackett's country club onto Colonel Bill's property, it hit a cow, and that incensed Colonel Bill. So he takes his oxen, and he hooks them up, and he hooks it up to Sackett's little porch, and he yanks down the porch and dumps it.
And the menu says this was the first expulsion from a golf club in the United States. Who knows?
There never would have been a Bonnie Brier had one of Colonel Bill's options gone forward, to flip the property for profit. But he opted finally to keep most of it, just over 140 acres, for his own dream house. At 100,000 square feet, it would rival the robber baron mansions along the Hudson. He didn't have to go far for building materials. His land had a natural quarry and timber galore. His vision was imposing. But on New Year's Day, 1916, before he could complete it, after his death, with all attention focused on the war raging overseas, his dream home fell into shocking neglect, doomed to become what the local press called a haunted house of mystery. The mansion's salvation would have to await the end of a world war and return of a prodigal son.